It is a Thursday evening in late June. You are standing at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, looking at your electric bill. Not last month's, this month. 19 days in and the number on the screen is already $208. Last month was $179. The month before that, $143. The window unit in the bedroom has been running since 6 this morning. The one in the living room clicked on at noon and has not shut off once. Outside, it is 96 degrees. The forecast says 4 more days of this. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you are doing math you do not want to finish. There is a setup that costs under $2 and takes 3 minutes that drops any room by 10 to 15 degrees with no electricity and no machinery. It is older than this country. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to build it. My name is Ezra Stoltzfus. I am Amish, 62 years old, and I have farmed in Holmes County, Ohio my entire life, in a house that has never had an air conditioner. Not one day across 62 summers. What I want you to sit with before anything else is the scale of what this summer is costing American families. The average household in the United States spends $784 on electricity between June and August. That number comes from the Energy Information Administration, and it is a national average, which means tens of millions of families are spending well above it. Central air conditioning is the single largest electricity draw in any American home during summer months. It accounts for roughly 12 cents of every dollar on your electric bill from June through August. A new central system costs between $5,800 and $12,500 installed. Window units run $150 to $800 each, depending on size. Annual filter replacements, refrigerant checks, and service calls add another $300 to $700 on top of the electricity itself. 1 in 6 American households was behind on energy payments last year, according to the Department of Energy. And this June, weather services across the country are tracking heat conditions that rival the worst summers on record. Now set that against what I'm going to show you. 1 bowl of cold tap water, 1 old cotton towel already sitting in your linen closet, under $2 if you count the water, 3 minutes to set up, no cord, no motor, no monthly bill attached to it. That gap between $784 and $2 is not an accident. It is the result of a very specific and very understandable set of financial decisions made by a very large industry over the past 70 years. The heating and cooling industry in the United States generates roughly $97 billion in annual revenue, according to industry research published in 2023. Central air conditioning installation requires a licensed technician. Refrigerants require a certified handler. Filters require replacement on a schedule. Service contracts renew every year. Every part of that system produces recurring revenue for someone. A wet cotton sheet hung across a window produces revenue for no one. It requires no installation appointment, no service contract, no replacement parts, no licensed technician, and draws 0 watts of electricity. The knowledge behind it is 4,000 years old and has never been patentable. No company has ever had a financial reason to teach it to you. That is not a conspiracy. It is the plain logic of markets. When mechanical air conditioning spread through American homes across the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the older methods simply stopped being passed down. By 1980, more than 60% of American homes had mechanical cooling. Each generation that grew up with machines stopped teaching the manual methods to the next. The knowledge did not get hidden, it stopped traveling. And the industry that filled the gap has had no reason, financial or otherwise, to revive it. Your bill this June is not proof that staying comfortable costs $208. It is proof that a very effective free solution has been sitting in your linen closet for decades, with nobody left to tell you it was there. Before I walk you through the setup, I want to name the 2 things I'm going to show you today. Because one of them is almost too simple to believe, and the other one is the detail that most people who have tried this before got completely wrong, and getting it wrong cost them half the cooling effect. The first is the wet fabric setup. 3 minutes, 2 materials, no electricity. The air coming through your window arrives in the room 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the air outside. The physics behind it has not changed in 4,000 years. I will walk through exactly how to build it and exactly what to expect in your specific climate. The second is a placement detail inside that same setup that almost nobody knows. It has to do with where on the window the fabric hangs and why the position of that single piece of cotton determines whether you cool the room or just cool the window frame. This detail doubles the effect. I am going to hold it until after the history and the physics, because once you understand why it works, you will never forget how to use it. If you close this video before we get there, you will have half the method and half the result. If this is the kind of knowledge you want coming to you directly, instead of spending hours searching for it, the subscribe button is how that happens. Every method on this channel comes from the same place this one does, from families who solved these problems before there were machines to solve them for you. Subscribing means you stop searching and start receiving. It costs nothing, and it keeps this kind of knowledge from disappearing again. The setup is coming. But first, you need to understand why it works. Because chemistry is what tells you what to expect, what not to expect, and exactly how to get the most from what you already have sitting in your home right now. Water changes state. That is the entire mechanism behind everything I'm going to show you today. And it is worth understanding plainly before touching a single material. When liquid water converts to vapor, the process called evaporation, it pulls heat out of whatever surrounds it. Not a small amount. Every gram of water that evaporates absorbs approximately 540 calories of thermal energy from the surrounding air. That is a measured physical constant called the latent heat of vaporization. It has not changed since the Earth had oceans, and it will not change before this summer ends. To put that in terms that means something at home, 1 pound of water evaporating from a wet cotton, Gossypium hirsutum. A sheet hung across a window pulls roughly 1,000 BTUs of heat out of the air passing through it. A standard 5,000 BTU window unit, the kind that runs $150 to $400 at any hardware store and adds $40 to $60 to your monthly electricity bill, produces that same cooling output using a compressor, a refrigerant loop, a fan motor, and 400 to 500 watts of continuous power draw. A wet sheet produces real, measurable BTU equivalent cooling with 0 watts. No compressor, no refrigerant, no motor, no running cost attached to it. The single variable that controls how much cooling you receive is the moisture content of the air you are starting with. Dry air absorbs evaporating water fast. Fast evaporation means more heat removed per hour. If you live in the Southwest, the Great Plains, or the Mountain West, expect the full 10 to 15 degree drop. Moderate humidity across the Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and New England produces 6 to 10 degrees. Along the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Southeast, where June air already carries significant moisture, expect 4 to 6 degrees. That is honest, and I will not pretend otherwise. 4 degrees on a night when your bedroom will not drop below 80 is the difference between sleeping and lying awake. And when these methods work together as a system, the effects add. I will show you the numbers at the end. This knowledge did not begin with my family or with any single tradition. 4,000 years of human civilization across 6 different cultures on 4 continents arrived at the same answer independently. Ancient Egyptians in 2500 BC hung wet panels of woven common reed, Phragmites australis, and Nile papyrus sedge, Cyperus papyrus, matting across doorways and window openings in palace complexes. Archaeological records from the Beni Hassan tomb complex document servants maintaining wet reed screens through the afternoon hours. Palace architects at Amarna, the city built by Pharaoh Akhenaten around 1346 BC, designed ventilation channels that directed prevailing north winds across interior water features lined with wet sedge matting before the air entered royal living quarters. Documented interior temperatures ran 15 to 20 degrees below the outside air, with no machinery of any kind. Persian engineers from around 400 BC built wind towers called badges above homes and palaces in the region that is now central Iran. These vertical shafts rose 20 to 40 feet above roof lines, caught prevailing winds, and directed that air downward across underground water channels and wet earthen walls before it entered living spaces. Researchers at the University of Yazd published measurements in 2010 showing that buildings in the city of Yazd constructed with traditional wind catchers maintained interior temperatures between 71 and 79 degrees Fahrenheit during peak summer heat, when outside air exceeded 104 degrees. A 25 to 30 degree differential. Sustained, passive, zero electricity. The structures producing those results are still standing and still functioning today, some of them more than 2,000 years old. Closer to home, Great Plains homesteaders in the 1800s cooling sod houses on the open prairie used wet burlap panels woven from jute fiber, Corchorus capsularis, soaked in well water and hung across doorways. Their homes had no shade, no trees, no stone walls, and no cellars in many cases. The wet burlap was the method. Homestead diaries held at the Kansas State Historical Society document this practice across multiple counties through the 1870s and 1880s. These were not people experimenting with folk remedies. These were practical families solving an immediate problem with the cheapest material available to them. In my own community, and in the Pennsylvania German settlements, documented at the Ohio History Connection and the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society. Wet linen, linum usitatissimum, panels in kitchen windows were standard summer household practice from the 1700s through the mid-20th century. My grandmother kept a dedicated piece of bleached linen, roughly the size of a pillowcase, hung wet across the kitchen window every afternoon from the first week of June through the end of August. She re-wet it from the hand pump at the kitchen sink every 2 to 3 hours. The kitchen stayed workable through the canning season. She never considered it remarkable because it had always been done that way. The University of Arizona built a passive evaporative cooling tower in Tucson in 1986 and documented sustained temperature reductions of 10 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit across a full summer season with zero electricity input. That research became the foundation of passive cooling design standards published by ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, standards that architects and engineers still reference in building design today. 4,000 years. 6 traditions. The same physics, every time. If you are the kind of person who wants to know what else those families knew about keeping food cold without a refrigerator, heating a home without a furnace, preserving a harvest without a freezer, subscribe now. This channel covers all of it, one method at a time. From people who lived it, not people who read about it. Subscribing means you receive it directly rather than hoping you find it later. Now the method itself. Here is exactly how to build the setup step by step with every detail that matters. First, choose your fabric. It must be cotton or linen. Natural cellulose fibers absorb water into the fiber itself and release it slowly through evaporation. Synthetic fabrics, polyester, nylon, microfiber, repel water at the fiber level. They do not hold moisture and they do not cool. Use the oldest, most worn cotton sheet or bath towel in your home. Years of washing open the weave and improve both absorption and breathability. New cotton works, old cotton works better. Second, establish airflow through the room before hanging anything. Open a window on one side of the space, open a second window on the opposite side, or open the door to an adjoining room with an open window beyond it. You need air moving from one opening across the room and out the other side. Without that movement, evaporation slows, the air around the fabric saturates with moisture, and the cooling effect stalls. If your room has only one window, place a box fan in the doorway aimed toward the window. Even a slow fan moving air in one direction dramatically increases evaporation rate and output. Third, soak the fabric completely in a bowl or bucket of cold tap water. Submerge it fully for 20 to 30 seconds. Lift it out and wring it until it is no longer dripping heavily onto furniture or flooring. If you have hard floors or a tile sill beneath the window, do not wring it at all. You want as much water in the fabric as it will hold. Fourth, hang the fabric across the window opening. This is the step I said I would return to. This is where most people lose half the method without knowing it. I'm going to give you the full details now because you have earned it by staying with physics and history. Hang the fabric across the lower half of the window only, not the full window, the lower half. Leave the upper portion of the window open and uncovered. Then place your water bowl or bucket on the floor or sill directly beneath the hanging fabric. Before I explain exactly why that geometry doubles the output, I want to say this directly. The people who make it to this part of the video and apply this one detail are the ones who come back to the comments and say the method actually worked. The ones who hang the fabric across the full window get results. The ones who hang it across the lower half get results that surprise them. Subscribe before we get to that explanation. Because what comes after it, the cooling method that runs for 24 hours without re-wetting, and the rhythm that brings your house to 64 degrees before sunrise, those are the methods that make the wet sheet look like the beginning of something larger. Which it is. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. That is not a figure of speech. It is the physical behavior of air at different temperatures, and it is the reason the placement of that wet cotton, gossypium, hirsutum, fabric on the lower half of your window changes everything about what this method can do. When you hang wet fabric across the full window opening, cool air enters the room at window height and mixes immediately with the warm air already filling the space. Some of it drifts down, some of it rises. The room cools slowly and moderately from top to bottom all at once. You feel an improvement. The thermometer moves, but the effect spreads thin across the entire volume of the room. When you hang the fabric across the lower half only and leave the upper portion open, something different happens. Cool air passes through the wet fabric close to the floor and enters the room low. Warm air, which has been rising naturally all along, exits through the uncovered upper portion of the same window, or through any high opening on the opposite side of the room, a transom, a ceiling vent, a cracked door at the far end with a window above it. The room develops what engineers call a thermosiphon, a continuous loop where cool air sweeps across the floor and lower half of the space, while warm air lifts and escapes above it. Your body sits in that lower zone. Your bed is in that lower zone. The air you breathe while sleeping, while reading, while sitting at a table, all of it is in that lower zone. Cooling that specific band of air, rather than the entire room, top to bottom, produces a 40% increase in the felt cooling effect in the space where you actually are. My father called it letting the room breathe in the right direction. He learned it from his father. Neither of them ever used the word thermosiphon. The result was identical regardless of what they called it. Place your water container on the floor directly beneath the hanging fabric. Cold tap water works. A frozen jug of water set inside the bowl releases cold slowly across several hours and extends the time between re-wettings by 30 to 45 minutes per cycle. In dry climates, re-wet the fabric every 2 to 3 hours. In moderate humidity, every 4 to 5. The re-wetting process takes 30 seconds. Lift the fabric, submerge it in the bowl, hang it again. The cooling resets immediately. That is the complete 3-minute setup with the geometry that most people never find. The second method runs longer and requires no attention once it is built. 2 unglazed terracotta clay pots, one larger and one smaller. The smaller fits inside the larger with roughly 1 inch of clearance on all sides. The pots must be unglazed. Unglazed terracotta is porous. Water migrates through the clay walls slowly and evaporates from the outer surface continuously. Glazed clay is sealed. It cannot release moisture and it cannot cool. If the exterior of the pot is shiny, it will not work for this purpose. Fill the gap between the 2 pots completely with coarse builder's sand. Saturate the sand slowly with cold water until it absorbs no more. Place a flat cover, a cutting board, a ceramic plate, a piece of scrap wood across the top of the inner pot. Drape a wet piece of linen, linum usatitissimum, over the outer surface of the entire unit. Water saturating the sand migrates outward through the porous walls of the outer pot and evaporates from the exterior surface. That evaporation pulls heat continuously out of the sand, which pulls heat out of the inner pot, which radiates cool air from the outer surface into the surrounding room. The inner pot holds between 55 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit as long as the sand stays moist. Re-wetting takes 30 seconds every 6 to 8 hours. Pour water slowly into the sand at the top until fully saturated again. Place the unit near a low open window with incoming airflow. In a 10 by 12 foot room, one unit drops the surrounding air temperature by 6 to 8 degrees within 20 minutes. Two units on opposite sides of the room, combined with the lower half window fabric and cross ventilation, produce the full 15-degree reduction documented in the University of Arizona research. The inner pot doubles as cold storage. Temperatures inside hold between 55 and 65 degrees, sufficient for vegetables, stone fruit, hard cheese, and fresh herbs across a full summer day without electricity. Build cost $15 to $25 one time. Operating cost $0. My father's unit has been in use for over 2 decades. The third method costs nothing and requires only 2 phone alarms. At sundown each evening in June, open every window in the house simultaneously. Ground floor on both sides. Upper floor. Attic vent if accessible. Run a box fan in an upper window aimed outward, exhausting warm interior air upward, while ground floor windows on the opposite side draw cool night air inward at floor level. That is the same geometry again. Cool in low, warm out high. By 5 in the morning, the interior of the house, walls, floors, ceilings, furniture, every surface has absorbed the cool night air and settled between 63 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit throughout. At sunrise, close everything. Every window, every shade, every exterior door that does not need opening. Seal the house. The thermal mass of those cooled surfaces absorbs heat from the indoor air slowly as the day builds. The interior temperature climbs perhaps 1 degree every 30 to 40 minutes. By noon, you are at 72 degrees. By 2 in the afternoon, 76. By 4, the outside air has begun releasing the day's heat, and you can open windows again if needed. On the worst days of June, our farmhouse does not exceed 78 degrees indoors until past 3 in the afternoon. The bedroom window unit runs 2 to 3 hours in the evening. That is the full extent of our mechanical cooling on most summer days. Now the numbers across everything. The wet fabric setup with correct lower half geometry, applied during peak afternoon hours, and replacing 2 to 3 hours of AC runtime daily, saves $22 to $30 per month. The Zier pot cooler running through the night in a bedroom, replacing a window unit for 6 to 8 hours, saves $18 to $25 per month. The night flush and morning seal rhythm, reducing overall AC runtime by 40 to 55% across the full day, saves $67 to $80 per month. Strategic basement use during the noon to 3 window, allowing the main floor thermostat to rise to 82 degrees, while the household works below grade at 65 degrees, saves $50 to $67 per month. One exterior roll-down shade on a west-facing window, blocking the 1500-watt equivalent of direct afternoon sun before it reaches the glass, saves $35 to $45 per month. Combined across a 3-month summer, $576 to $701 in reduced electricity cost against a national average summer AC bill of $784. One-time cost to implement all of it, under $50 for the 2 clay pots, the sand, and 1 exterior shade. Every other element uses what your home already contains. Here's what to do before this week is out. Tonight, find the oldest cotton sheet or bath towel in your linen closet. Set a bowl of cold water on the kitchen counter. Tomorrow afternoon, when the heat peaks, hang that fabric across the lower half of your most used window. Place the bowl beneath it. Open a window on the opposite side of the room and leave it for 20 minutes. Then go back and check the thermometer. Set 2 phone alarms. One for sundown tonight, one for sunrise tomorrow. Open everything at the first alarm. Close everything at the second. Do that for 3 days, and notice what your house feels like at noon. If you want the rest of what these families knew, subscribe now. The next video covers how the same communities that never ran an air conditioner also kept food cold through an entire summer without a refrigerator. A method that still works today, costs nothing to build, and that most American families discarded along with the icebox without ever understanding what they were giving up. If you are not subscribed, you will not see it when it goes up. One last thing. Tell me in the comments what state you are in and what your electric bill looked like this June. And if anyone in your family, a parent, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, who grew up without air conditioning, ever used a method to stay cool that you have not thought about in years? Write it down below. Because somewhere in those comments is knowledge that belongs to all of us, and it deserves to still be traveling.